Hi, I'm Nate and you're watching Photolearningism. We've done a lot of things in this channel with KDEnlive and other tools. We've kind of stuck our toes a little bit with special and visual effects. Why don't we take that one step further tonight, digging a little deeper into KDEnlive, and let's see what kinds of visual effects we could actually get our fingers and toes into, shall we? Once again, I'm Nate. This is Photolearningism. If this is your first time joining in, thank you very much. I do a lot of work on this channel to surface the cheap or free art technologies so that you can know about them and make good use of it, and also be a part of a community of learners where we can help each other grow and experience new things and new tools and become stronger together. So I wanted to kind of get back to the visual effects ideas, particularly in KDEnlive because it's free, it's open source, and hey, we can kind of take our time learning it and figuring it out. So getting into that, I wanted to try out a very simple concept of a muzzle flare. And if you're not familiar with that, it's pretty much when you shoot off a gun, there's a blast of light. In my case, I tried a couple of things. I tried the flare, I tried a bullet casing flying out of the gun. All this stuff is kind of made up. I have a little prop that I have. I tried to reuse what I had on hand and see just what we could do on a simple level, but kind of give you some eye-opening experience of what this tool can do and how you could achieve some similar ideas. So digging in first here, I'd pre-recorded some of this because I wasn't sure it was going to work. But I do have some proof of concept now to show you. So kicking off here, what I was doing, this is Paint.net, by the way. It's a free tool, fantastic for using Windows. But I wanted to keep this very simple because this is a lightweight tool, and all I really wanted to do was draw out something super, super basic. Again, this is a muzzle flare, and this is probably going to drag on for a few minutes here, so I'm just going to keep talking. But it just needed to be like a blast, almost like a star flash, and it took me just a couple of tries here to figure out the thickness that I wanted to start with for line, and there we go. Now, one of the great things about Paint.net here is that it does give you kind of vector line drawing capabilities. So I'm starting with that, with the line tool, because it does maintain the properties of the line on a per drawing basis, meaning that as soon as I take the focus off of that, it becomes permanent, but it does give you the flexibility to make adjustments if I really wanted to during that. So in any case, it's really easy to draw these lines in Paint.net, and again, I was just looking to do something very simple, quick, and painless, and that was the right solution for what I needed. So I took that out of my toolkit, and we drew up this. You can kind of start to see how the star shape is starting to come into focus a little bit here. Again, this is not going to be hyper realistic. It's just kind of the idea to simulate what we're after here. A few more clicks into it, and then I'm going to try to finish up the idea of it. It involves giving a little bit of blur to it, kind of blending in some gradients so it actually looks like it has a little bit of color spectrum to it. So yeah, I want the middle to be white because it's a blast of light. White is all the colors. And then a little bit of Gaussian blur just to kind of tie it all together. And I'm going to take off, as soon as I'm done with that, the outline, because I duplicated that just for safety. I usually do that. It's part of my workflow process. So that is the starting image there for what we needed to create that part. Now, moving on to the next piece here. Let's see. Here we go. This part was working with the bullet shell casing, because that's the next thing I wanted to try out. This is a Nerf dart. I know it doesn't have the right color, almost the right shape, and you'll notice how I was trying to do kind of a chroma background. I realized I was overcomplicating it when I started out doing this, because I was thinking, oh well, I've seen some really fancy approaches where they green screen, or they take an object and they just chroma it out, and I started doing that, and I realized, why don't I just take a picture, because it's a single frame, and why don't I add the motion later? Because that's pretty simple. You have a transform control in KDEnlive. So I began working with it again, Paint.net, trying to keep it simple. And as I started to work with it, you'll see me try to use the erase tool, but that's giving some ridges that I don't really want. Not that that's terribly important right now, but I made it harder on myself than it should have been, and you'll see in a moment that I realized, hey, I could just rotate the canvas, because again, I'm going to do the motion in post. I don't have to fight these angles, these weird angles. So what I'm going to do here is, once I find the right tool and create a safety layer again, we're going to rotate it and try to square it off such that it will be a lot easier to cut out the parts that I want. I really just want to do a square selector and get rid of the extra space. I don't have to do the chroma background, which can get a little dicey. I mean, that probably would have worked to a point, but you can see there's a lot of different shades of blue. It's not really evenly lit. Again, this was a very simple test here. But I was trying to make this as clean-cut, simple as possible. So rotated it a little bit, close enough. I'm going to start chopping away the excess and just getting the part of it that I really want. And again, the top, just line it up, get it as close as I can, snip, get rid of that side, snip, so on and so forth, and just get rid of everything except for the part that I want. So I'm going to move in a little closer beyond that point. Now I'm going to flip over to the erase tool just to kind of fine tune it a little bit to get rid of that front orange piece. All right, and now the other side of things. Now, as I start to work on the front, the 100% hardness is pretty abrasive, as you can see. There's no forgiveness at all. So I realized that, yeah, that's just not going to be close enough. I mean, this is rough anyway, but I want it to be a little better than that. So I dialed down to 95% because it's just a little bit of soft edge to it, and that works a lot better. That worked a lot better for this, and I've done that in other cases too where that's been true. So just going to tidy it up a bit here and there, make it look a little more presentable along the top there as well. Try to get rid of that little sliver of blue in that side. While I'm doing this, we did do some other kind of reaches into visual effects. We did kind of a fly-through effect through my open hand. You should go check out that video if you have the opportunity over there and see what that was all about. See some more capabilities that could be useful for you. All right, so finished blocking it out. Now what I want to do is I want it to look somewhat like a bullet casing, and most bullet casings are brass. So I'm just going to play with the hue a little bit, try to get it off of blue, and just really push that up towards like a golden brass color. I know this is more gold than brass, but hey, at least it's not blue anymore. And that's pretty good for me. All right, so that's the bullet casing that I was looking to get my hands on. All right, so now we get into the good part. This is where we start putting it into practice. Now, I had gone outside, I shot some very simple video on my iPhone, because again, this is all test stuff. That's my gun prop. It's a really old Nerf gun that I kind of mangled up and cut into shape just for simple fun tests like this, so I could have some fun here and there. You'll notice a little bit of duct tape along the back there. Hey, classic stuff, right? Anyways, so this is the muzzle flare, and first thing I have to figure out is where that should logically be, you know, when I recoil pretending to shoot. So kind of have the first moment here. I'm going to add a transform because I want to move it off of where it is and put it at the front of the barrel. All right, so that's where it is. That's good positionally, but we kind of need to do some work with the effect because that's obviously overlapping the rest of the object, and if you're shooting away, that's not really true to life at all. So what we're going to do then is use the rotoscoping effect and throw that on, and that gives us the ability to map out sections that we can either remove, or it's like a mask effect in essence that we can keyframe if we wanted to, and I will. I'll show you how. But you can add, I haven't found a limit, you can add points to isolate objects and mask them off. You could get very precise. You can actually use the viewfinder there for playback to zoom in and get really close and tight and figure this out. I'm approximating because again, this is test. I wanted to see if this was even going to work. But you click with the left mouse button to set the initial points, and the last point is a right click to finalize the shape. Very important. All right, so that's the first part of this, and then you can see me there setting it to subtract. on the alpha operation to make sure that the space that I am mapping is removed from what I'm adding it to. And you can see that the flare now has a chunk cut out of it in the shape of the front of the gun. Pretty cool, right? So that's a simple premise of that. Now, what I'm trying to do here is make this more than a frame long, and it was giving me some trouble in KDEnlive trying to make it bigger, so I had to zoom in for a second and then make some adjustments just so I could work with it, and then I could pull back out a little bit. That's with the mouse roller, by the way, to do that. So we did that. Okay, so we have one shot, one frame mapped out. I'm going to do it again because I fired 3 times. Boom, boom, boom. All right, so I'm going to copy, and then we're going to paste that up and bring that in. Now, it's not quite exactly where it was, so I need to do just a little bit of tidying up where I select the clip and then select the rotoscoping effect and the effects panel down there. I can drag the whole masked shape. And again, because I copied the clip, it maintains the effects that I had applied to it, so that makes it a little simpler. I can reposition the initial shape, and I can reposition the points to refit my movement, which is really cool. All right, so that's the second shot. Now I'm tidying it up a little bit further. What I did there, in case you missed it, is I disabled the video for the muzzle flares just so I could see the gun a little more clearly and not have to guess. All right, I'll turn it back on as I go through it, but that can be really useful in this particular case. So I'm happy with that. Flipping that video track back on. Yep, all right. And I can see that there's some other abnormality there, so I'm going to fix my point to make sure I don't lose the gun. All right, a little bit more tidying up there. All right, so we've got 1, 2 shots. We got 1 more to go, and I'm going to find that. There I am. I'm recoiling. 3rd shot. Copy, paste it over, position it, and again, not right because I moved a little bit more, so a little more correction. Copying the effect, or not copying, but clicking the effect and repositioning, moving the points as I need to. And you may also notice that the muzzle flare is off as well, which I did notice that, so I'm fixing that now to put it back on the front of the barrel, because it's no good if the flare is not where the shot fires off, right? That doesn't look real at all. So same thing here. Going to select the transform effect so I can reposition the flare, the blast. There it is. Okay, and we get our 3 shots. Now it's looking pretty good, and we're getting closer, but there's still some other things to kind of work on here. So what I'm going to do next is actually I'm going to throw the bullet on there so we can start working with that and start putting the layers together. These are compounded with the base video on the bottom, and I'm working my way up for the different things. And you'd want to order these in the way that they're going to stack, almost like a picture where the layers need to be, you know, whatever needs to overlap or be on top, that's the topmost layer. Okay, in this case, that's the bullet. So I'm putting that in. And this one is a little more complex, a little trickier yet than the shot, because we have to employ a little bit more technique with this. All right, so we do start with a transform because we have to move it. All right, that's what I'm doing first. I'm going to put it at the place where it kind of feels like the, I'm not super familiar with gun parts, so I'm just going to name it the ejector. I know it's the chamber ultimately, but that's where it ejects from the chamber, that slot. So that's where the shell casing should be, right? Where it comes out. Good place to start. And I am adding keyframes because I want to do some simple animation to do movement. I mentioned I wanted to do the movement in post. All right. So the ending moment, I want to make sure that the bullet shell kind of flips over because there's a little bit of energy as it follows out. So I'm trying to show that and demonstrate that with a little rotation from the effect. And also, it should fly off the camera because it's not going to stay in the picture. All right, so that's beginning and end, although we want to make it a little more complex here, and we want to say, okay, well, there should be a little tiny bit, a little bit arc because it's, you know, moving over and out, okay? So that gives us most of that. Now, I think what I'm going to do here, is I'm going to add rotoscoping to this now. Same idea is that I want to subtract off the beginning of the chamber there. So the bullet just doesn't appear, the casing just doesn't appear, but we can actually mask off that part of the gun to make it actually look like it's coming out of the gun, like it should be. So that is the mask. Again, same idea, subtracting with the shape, and we can see that that should have the shell mimic coming out of the chamber now. All right, that's not bad. All right, so copy and paste again. Going to use the same basis. We have to move the shell casing, and then we have to adjust the rotoscoping again because, again, we have moved. Nothing is where it was the first shot. Can't be that easy, right? But thankfully with these tools, it actually becomes quite manageable. So at the starting position, you'll notice how the angle of the gun is also a little bit tilted. So I'm going to correct that with rotation on that first keyframe to try to match that up a little bit. Get it close enough where at least as a quick moment it looks acceptably real. I'm going to move my rotoscope shape, my mask, back into position. And again, I'm going to disable that track just so it's a little easier for me to see what I'm doing. And I'll flip it back on. All right. And I think, yeah, I had noticed that the bottom of the shell casing was showing. It wasn't quite positioned right. So I'm just going to work on that a little bit. I'm moving the shell casing up just a little bit. There we go. And also fixing the point of the rotoscope shape. Okay, 2 shots. Copy and paste once again. And all the same ideas except that we have moved once again and we have to do similar corrections to get it in the right spot. Similar rotation in the effects panel, trying to make it match a little bit with the geometry of what we have. And then, of course, moving the shape, the mask, back into position for the chamber. All right. So we're getting closer and closer and closer. That's where we're at. Okay. Now, I wanted to do a little bit more because in your field of view, things change a little bit. All right. So first thing I noticed is that that second frame, so you can see the muzzle flare. Look at that. Yeah, it's still stuck with the position and with the rotoscope in the old position, and I moved again. So we have to add another keyframe to compensate for that, to make sure that as I recoil the gun, the flare is still where it was because that's where the blast was, but the gun moved. And the same for all those. So have to implement that ending keyframe, a little bit of animation just to compensate and make sure that we sell the effect just a bit more by following through on that mask. Now, thankfully, I don't have to move all the points because, again, this is just a simple flare and it doesn't pop out everywhere on the gun, so I just have to fix the points that are respective to that. All right, one last correction here. That was a... Wow, I really pulled back on that one. Now, this one, I remember, it kind of gave me a little trouble where, excuse me, it was not letting me draw out the last frame for whatever reason, even though I kept trying and trying and trying. I would hit it and it wouldn't work. I tried to select it, it wouldn't make the change. It's doing some really kind of weird things. So what I ended up doing, I believe, is getting rid of that that little image snippet and then borrowing another one and just fixing it, starting with a new copy because it just wasn't working. And I'm pretty sure I gave up on it soon. There we go. That's kind of the final nail in the coffin there, because it said to redraw the points, and that really confused me. Yep. So. Yeah, couldn't make sense of that. I'm willing my other self here to move on by here, because I know I figured it out eventually. There you go. So got rid of it. Again, copy and paste another one that we know was good. And forward we go. So thankfully this time that worked. Whatever was going wrong with trying to set the keyframes, who knows? Who knows? But point is that we were able to fix it with just removing it and making a new copy. So I did have to fix the points on the original keyframe because, again, we're borrowing from the second one and it's not exactly the same, but close enough we can fix it easily. All right, so adding in that keyframe on the end of the rotoscoping effect, make sure you're using the right effect, and we're going to fix that as well. Again, it gets easier because it's not overlapping so much with the gun pulled up at that point. So simple corrections here just to make that better. All right. So now the gun moves and the flare actually fills back in. All right. So this is looking pretty cool. There is one more thing, though, that I wanted to tighten up. And that was giving some blur. All right. This is the part that I was looking forward to because this is kind of the fun touch accent stuff that that gets you along. So I used the second box blur effect. The first one doesn't give you keyframing ability. The reason that's important is that you can actually adjust the intensity of blur, and I really wanted that control because the bullet moves. It's moving closer to the camera. It's floating in that field, depth of field. So I wanted to start out at a reasonable place, match to the gun. I think I went back and fixed it and made it 0 blur later. But yeah, I wanted it to kind of pull from focus, out of focus as it gets closer, just to suggest where the bullet's flying, just to make you feel like it was really there, or at least somewhat. I realize it's not a realistic bullet casing, but for what it is, we're going to try to make it look like at least it was floating through. So yeah, this is, I'm adding in the individual frames. There's only 4 of them that I can use because there's only 4 frames of footage. So I'm trying to set the blur more intense as it goes. Originally, I thought it was going to pass out of focus into focus out again, but that's not realistic because it should start in focus. So I did come to that realization here and set the starting point at 0, where it should be no blur. At least at some point I did. There we go. And then we step it through to the other places. We're at frame 2. Pull some blur into it. Just want to make sure it's selecting it. Give me a little trouble there. And the numerical value, by the way, is on the lower right-hand side. You can kind of see how it increases. You could, I think, actually click in there and do that by hand if you wanted to. Just dragging is easier sometimes. All right, so we have that blur effect where it passes through. It gets more blurred as it gets closer. Awesome. So now I want to reuse that without having to redo all that stuff over again. This is a really cool shortcut where I can save that as a preset. And I'm just going to give it a name. And this stays with the project, I believe. I don't think it floats between projects. So it's only useful in this project. But yeah, I can now go to the next thing, use the same effect, drop it in, and then go to the same presets panel there. And there it is. I can just simply load it, and I don't have to do anything else. It has all the keyframes and values that I set. And then repeat one more time. So now we have 3 shots. They all have a muzzle flare that is mapped out fairly realistically, and they all have a bullet casing. And that is the concept. So what this essentially means is that now you have the capability to do simple visual effects. You could borrow this premise. You could make laser pistols along the same line where you start off with a simple graphic and do the motion in post. I'm exploring with lightsabers, but I haven't quite figured that one out, but it'd be really fun to test out. I did get some simple concepts working, but we're not really ready to dig into that. I hope to get a little bit further along with that soon. But this is what we have produced, is that we made a firing weapon here. That's pretty awesome for just setting this up in a free open source tool, making our own images with a couple of minutes. I played things back in real time, by the way. I did not speed anything up, so literally this whole process that I showed you took about 15 minutes to do this quick shot. It really wasn't that hard at all. And the keyframing and rotoscoping masking abilities make it just so powerful in this tool. So that's the idea. I really hope that was interesting and helpful for you as you explore this tool and possibly others. Let me know if there's a tool like this, especially one that works in visual effects, something particularly open source, although if it's commercial, do let me know, because I like to check all this stuff out and help us make connections, because we're all trying to do something new and different, right? So give me a thumbs up if that was helpful. Consider subscribing so you don't miss out on the awesome stuff we're going to get to in the future. And leave a comment, ask a question, and not just for me, but for the whole community, because I'm looking for us to invest in each other and make each other stronger. Thank you so much for spending your time with me. I will see you at the next video.